Hello, welcome to our webinar on Lead Gen Outlook 2026. We're so thankful to our partner for Infuse for putting this program on today, and we're also grateful to each one of you. We realize the life of your practice keeps you hopping busy, and we're so grateful you've joined us today. We hope you find the program to be beneficial and of value. Before we get rolling, I do have a few quick administrative announcements. First off, today's program will be in listen-only mode. That means we will not be able to hear you, but we do very much welcome your questions. So please use the chat feature in Zoom. That's the chat, not the Q&A. So use the chat feature, and when you drop down, be sure to select everyone so that each person can see the questions or comments you pose. Additionally, today's program will be recorded. It takes a few days to get that all beautified, but it will be posted along with valuable material in our AAOE Learning Center. I will post in the chat how to access that Learning Center. And of course, if you have any questions about it, you may always feel free to reach out to our staff members at info@aaoe.net to help you out. That's info@aaoe.net. Also, as shared, even though it's listen-only mode, we do value dialogue and would like this to be interactive. So please do participate, but let's make sure that it is human participation. Our policy does not allow artificial intelligence or AI chatbots. So please respect that policy. If we do see those, we'll need to take those down. The program's meant for members and paying non-members. So thank you for respecting that. Without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Sarah and Scott. They're going to tell you a little bit about themselves. And thanks again to the whole team at Infuse and to each and every one of you for your support of AAOE. Enjoy the program.
Thank you, Heather.
You're very welcome.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here, and especially excited to be partnering with Addie and the team at AAOE, who are continually looking for ways to support their industry partners with opportunities like this. With the annual conference in Louisville coming up later this month, we felt this was a perfect time to share some of the top trends we're seeing across the B2B market. So our goal today is pretty simple. We want to provide actionable insights into the key shifts impacting ortho buying behavior and purchase decisions in 2026, so you can be better equipped as a seller or a marketer to win business in this evolving environment. So before we jump into the research, let's do some quick intros and housekeeping. First, my name is Scott Conley. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Infuse, leading our association business. Also joining us on the webinar today is Sarah Wyant, who's the Senior Director of Client Strategy at Infuse and our resident expert on all things B2B buying behavior. If you're not familiar with Infuse, we are a B2B demand generation company that works with sales and marketing teams to help them identify and enable buyers from awareness to revenue. It's a fancy way of saying that we're really good at helping companies find their next customer. So with that being said, just a couple quick housekeeping items before we jump in. So first, our goal is to wrap by 2:30. We would love to give you 15 minutes back in your day. So that is our goal. Also, as Heather mentioned, please feel free to submit questions in the chat throughout the session. We are very fortunate to have two members of the Infuse team monitoring the chat live today. So let me briefly introduce Chris Kumko and Eric Lawrence, who are both members of Infuse's commercial healthcare team. Not only are they kind enough to monitor the chat today, but they're also both going to be in Louisville at the annual conference later this month as resources to answer any questions or to discuss any topics that we go into today in further detail. If we don't get to your questions live today, we'll make sure to follow up afterwards. And just so everyone is aware, I know it was already mentioned, this session is being recorded, and you'll have access to it after we're done. All right, I think I've talked enough, so now I'd like to turn it over to Sarah to kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So today we're going to be talking about market trends, and both from the perspective of potential buyers as well as marketers themselves, what has changed within this market landscape that we need to be adapting to, and more specifically, how it relates to this organization. So what we've heard and what we're going to be going through today, a couple of key points. How to become the trusted partner for practice growth and efficiency, winning share within high-value orthopedic groups, and driving adoption across the entire practice buying committee. You're going to hear some consistent themes that align to each of these key goals. Things about authority and trust and how that's earned. What the importance of brand confidence in the buyer's ultimate buying and purchase decision, and the importance of a collective buying committee, not just the emphasis on any individual stakeholder, and how all of those things come together. So without further ado, let's jump right into the data itself. Like I mentioned, we're going to be looking at this from the perspective of both the buyer and the marketer. Those flip sides of each coin are really important, of course, to understand the challenges and mindsets of the buyers themselves, and then putting it in the perspective of how market leaders and the marketing teams are adapting to those trends. It's a really important way to balance both what's happening in the market from both of those perspectives to better, align yourselves to those trends, identify where you are within your peers, and it's a great point of view to look from. This may be the word I repeat the most in this presentation, which is trust. At the end of the day, we are living in a time where there's a significant trust gap. Buyers are consuming more information. They are synthesizing that information through new channels. And they are still, despite all of that, lacking in trust in that information and the sources where that comes from. And then on the flip side, marketers are faced with new challenges in gaining that trust from buyers, being able to be discoverable in these new channels, and the best ways to break through the clutter of this overload of information so that they can ultimately build trust with buyers. What that looks like, it means that buyers are needing help in making the decisions. And specifically, they need help in defending their decisions with confidence because they are drowning in AI, however, struggling to find the proof points that what they're searching for works. They are consuming more and more content, but are trusting less of it. And at the end of the day, they're choosing vendors based on that trust and technical fit, but loyalty is not there. So the challenges are coming from both sides. The challenge in the buyers in making their decision, defending their decision, and sticking with it. And then the challenges from influencing those decisions from the marketer's point of view in becoming discoverable, gaining that trust, and most importantly, gaining that loyalty. So we'll be talking about all of those here today. So discoverability. This is a really key point in making that short list of likely 3 to 5 vendors that a buyer is going to be evaluating when they're going down their purchase journey and research process. When we ask these buyers, how much does existing familiarity with a brand influence whether a brand makes that short list? It is very much a part of their decision. You can see 45% with extremely influential, 42% with moderately influential. Having previous knowledge of and familiarity with the solutions of a vendor is increasingly important. Buyers are not evaluating every single solution out there in the marketplace. They are starting with this short list and then going through what we call the dark funnel within their own research patterns to validate their assumptions and basically check boxes off of their checklist of what they need to be researching. So getting on that initial shortlist is absolutely critical because if you're not on that short list of vendors, you'll never make it to the final decision. And specifically, then once you move from, you're in the short list, what are the factors that are most important to buyers when they start evaluating these vendors? And it's all about technical fit. So things like alignment with a use case or essentially a pain point that these buyers are having, looking for demonstrated ROI, business value, new capabilities and solutions that are forward in the market. All of these things are really driven by the alignment of a buyer's pain points and then proof point that technically this is a good fit. Especially these specialized buyers, whether they're in technical roles or within these specialized industries like in orthopedics, they understand their own point of view, their own business needs, the technical information, but often translating that into a business outcome, influencing other decision makers who may have a different need within the context of the overarching business goal, that can be a real challenge. So having these proof points that this is a good fit is, within all of these different factors, kind of the through line of what gets a vendor evaluating in that purchase decision.
Yeah, I was going to ask Sarah, because there's a lot of stuff on this slide, a lot of data, and it's overwhelmingly points to technical fit. But like to kind of bring it back down to earth for those who are on the call actively selling into this space, like what does fit mean? Like, yes, there's like the technical side of it, but is there other ways that a potential or a seller could fit into and make a use case for why that practice should work with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, things like ease of adoption, workflow alignment, EMR integration, really, really hitting on the pain points of the buyer, and then very quickly, without the fluff, relating to how the solution solves those problems is going to be first and foremost on their minds. And this is really important too, because in the context of loyalty, when we ask buyers how satisfied they are with current vendors, it is really telling how many are only somewhat satisfied or not satisfied at all. So only 26% are satisfied completely. And it gives us that signal that the market is primed for switching vendors. So both as an opportunity to gain on competitive kind of conquesting motions, but also as a risk from your current customers. The loyalty is a challenge. And when you dive in a little bit deeper to think about, well, why is it? When current solutions are not meeting needs, what is the problem there? And you see things like innovation, productivity, cost, optimization, agility. Again, it's kind of like those proof points ultimately didn't live up to expectations. So you think about the buyer, they have their checklist, so to speak, of things that they're looking for in a new vendor. And if the solutions don't live up to that promise, especially around innovation, especially with AI forward, messaging and promises, among other things, but that being one of the hot topics, it's where people are dissatisfied. And the buyers are much more open to switching vendors because of those expectations not being met.
So it comes back to prove it, prove it, prove it.
Prove it and answer their questions.
Yeah.
That's another thing. And, getting to the point and then being able to live up to that. Which brings us to what we call the AI buying paradox. So there are a couple of really key and telling stats that came up through our research here. Buying groups are bigger. On average, we've seen buying groups grow from 8 to 9 stakeholders, but of course that varies among organizational size, especially among larger organizations. This can be as many as 10, 12, even more buyers. And you just think about with more people involved, more points of view or individual needs that they're looking to get met, finding consensus is a challenge. Coupled with, you have more people involved, but buying cycles are actually shorter. Again, the average that we're seeing is going from 8 to 7 months to close. This can vary by solution area to even quicker, depending on what specifically you're talking about. So you have more people involved, less time to make a decision, but buyers are still consuming more content, moving from 8 to 9 pieces average per deal. So none of these things really work together. You individually have to convince more people or get more people on board with one solution in a shorter amount of time, but you have so much more to consume in order to make those decisions. And this is kind of what both buyers and marketers are up against in influencing these decisions. And when we ask the marketers, how are you utilizing AI in order to start to reconcile these conflicting factors? And on the strong end of things, basically where marketers are investing in AI solutions, it comes in the form of things like predictive analysis and modeling. So basically starting to identify the right markets, segments, priorities. But when you look at actually deploying or scaling AI-driven activation in terms of this moving from segmentation to actually personalization, the action point, it's only about 6% of marketers that we're looking at. So the gap between planning and execution is really significant. And it's important to think about it from the perspective of marketers, because you kind of see that lag behind the way that buyers are utilizing AI in order to ask these types of tools, give me the top three providers, and this is my pain point. Potentially even, oh, I've heard about this vendor, how does this compare? Buyers are really activating with these types of tools, but marketers are lagging behind, which is why ultimately discoverability, even being recognized in the first place to be considered within that larger purchase journey is so critical. And so how to do that? It does come down to content. How are you getting your message out there? How are you influencing brand perception? How are you answering those questions that buyers have? And so when we ask, marketers what content formats are actually producing, high impact today, look at the top 4 of either top growing or top of the list. Things like case studies, educational content, ROI and business value, product demos. So again, it's those things that are the vehicles that can then provide the technical fit kind of information. Really getting down to the brass tacks of what are these buyers looking for and how can you best present that information without the fluff and really speaking to what they're looking for in their research. This also can include things like, naming practices, providing specific metrics, things like before and afters. But, sometimes that can be a challenge if you're on the side of producing content. I know it's not an easy ask to be able to develop those kinds of metrics or case studies with real customers. So think about the end goal. A buyer is looking for proof that something works, and they want to be able to defend their decision to other stakeholders within their organization. So having the relevance to make it most contextually important to them, as well as the resonance, basically to make it sticky, to make it highly valuable to them. These are the kind of vehicles that are delivering on those buyer needs.
Yeah, it's like no surprise that a case study, which is a real world example of how a product is being applied with a similar customer, would be kind of staying put year over year compared to others that are sliding when you have this big trust gap because there's so much content out there. And even if a specific product or solution doesn't include like an AI component, the likelihood that the person evaluating your product or solution is using AI in some shape or form is very likely or very high. And so when it comes to proof and proving and authenticating a solution, I think you touched on a couple things around named practices, specific metrics, clear before and after. This is the solution. This is how it impacted. This is the quantifiable way that it impacted the business. That's what companies are looking for in content, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, actions speak louder than words, but
Yeah.
how do you convey that in words? It's the proof points. It is the metrics, it is the industry relevance, and the showcasing what those actions are in these formats as best as possible.
So instead of like a tagline saying we improve efficiency for healthcare providers, it should be XYZ orthopedic group reduced patient intake time by this percent and added this number of new procedures per month. Like very specific, prove it. That's a way to kind of deal with the trust gap.
Yeah, exactly. And when we look at the ways that marketers are investing in discoverability, and these initiatives across the board, the top 3 initiatives contain things that are more traditionally invested in: SEO, paid media, thought leadership, and content marketing. And again, there's a bit of a lag when you think of answer engine optimization, generative engine optimization, falling towards the bottom 3 initiatives. There is that gap that needs to be addressed. And it is just the reality of the market today that buyers are turning to these tools more than ever. And if you're not visible within them, looking for a solution, then you'll never be considered. And the best case scenario, if we're not, is that a buyer has heard of you, is familiar with your products, and so the solution to then be able to add that into the consideration set.
So branding is more relevant than ever, but it's not gonna win you the business.
That's right. If you aren't showing up and you don't know about a buyer until they're already 70% of the way, 70 to 80 through their buying process, that bottleneck is really what's restricted the entire process in the beginning. And that's exactly kind of our main takeaway here. The 2 constraints that are really at the end of the day restricting pipeline and progress and revenue is the buyer confidence in your solutions, in their needs, as well as the discoverability on your brand. The AI effect is pushing these buying cycles, again, shorter and shorter, but with more people involved, more information. And so AI is the tool that buyers are leaning on to synthesize all of that conflicting information. And so that ultimately becomes the point of contention on our end as marketers and sellers. How do we, with brand and other tools, how are we staying in front of them, and making sure that buyers are aware and familiar and considering our solutions so that we can move through the funnel and start to answer their questions. At the end of the day, it comes down to, as we said many times, leading with proof, not just empty promises or too high level fluff, and really getting down to the technical needs of the buyer, and the relevance that it will be to their business, translating into business outcomes for the rest of the buying group. As marketers and sellers, optimizing for discovery especially within AI tools, as that's really changing the dynamic of a buyer in research mode.
And
And
that's a good point, Sarah. Sorry to
yeah,
sort of jump in, but like a real world use case. Many of us are familiar with like ChatGPT and all the other generative solutions out there. If I'm an ortho practice and I'm evaluating revenue cycle management products, versus in the past, I would have to do a lot of research, go on the company website, um, uh, probably write up a Word doc and do my own comparison. Now, a platform or a generative AI platform can do it for you, and it can do it in 30 seconds. And so that's what we're seeing. The evaluation process, even if a product or a company is not an AI-driven organization or
mhm,
AI-driven product, um, people are becoming more and more native to AI and using it in their everyday lives to evaluate and help them make decisions. Not to say it's the right decision, but there are things that you can do to help your company and your brand get included in the generative engine results. That's GEO, right? Generative engine
mhm.
optimization. So
Yep,
that's where it's optimizing for AI discoverability is so important. Is that right, Sarah?
that's exactly right. You are now branding not only to the buyer, but you are essentially branding to these AI tools. Um, a buyer puts in the top three concerns or pain points or needs in within a category, and it's got to be digestible, discoverable for the AI tools to then spit out a response. And that's just the reality of where we are today. And then to our third point about buying group enablement, a buyer is then turning around, maybe using AI tools, maybe pulling information that they got from their research utilizing AI tools to then make a business case to, finance and legal and, product teams, whoever else is in the buying group who all come to the table with unique points of view and needs so that they have to be able to translate recommendations and inform consensus. So creating that enablement, getting ahead of those different types of questions is really critical. And I think that about wraps us up.
Yeah,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
everyone's
Thank
time.
you, Sarah. That was great stuff. A lot of good data in there. If you'd like to learn more about the research we shared today, please feel free to scan this QR code. You can actually generate your own personalized version of our Infuse Outlook 2026, which drove a lot of the content and the insights that we shared today. So leave that up there for a second. And then, Sarah, if you go to the next slide. We're just awash in QR codes today. Before we wrap up, I did want to leave you with one clear message. We are here to help. So if you have immediate questions or need help with any of the areas discussed today, like content creation, building buying groups, brand recognition, or buyer enablement, feel free to scan this QR code and grab 15 to 20 minutes with us to chat. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, Eric and Chris will be on site at the annual conference. So feel free to connect with one of them while in Louisville. I do want to tee this up. We are going to have a giveaway on site at the annual conference. Chris makes wooden chessboards. So
Oh,
we've
cool.
made one that is customized to Louisville that we will be giving away for exhibitors. So talk to Eric and Chris about that when you see them on site. But otherwise, thank you again for your time today. And I hope you all have a very successful 2026. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott and Sarah, for the wonderful information, and Eric and Chris behind the scenes. We really appreciate all of you taking part, and thank you for the little plug about the conference and the amazing woodwork that will be there as well. So, good program, everybody. We value the partnership very much, and thank you all of you that are part of AAOE, and we hope you found this to be of value. Have a good, positive, productive rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.